Hello, welcome back. Thank you so much for being here. Today I'm going to be sharing my top 10 eyeshadow palettes for spring. So before we get into it, I do want to say a huge thank you to Ana Luisa for working with me on a portion of today's video. I have been wearing their pieces for a couple of years at this point, and I absolutely love their pieces. The reason I love them is because they're a sustainable, affordable jewelry brand based out of New York City. They are carbon neutral, and all of their pieces are backed by a 2-year warranty. So if they tarnish, if they break, anything like that, they are covered. They do offer free shipping within the US as well, which we all love. And what I really love is that they've also been incorporating a lot more silver pieces lately. So gold definitely had a huge moment, and now I see the trends are starting to shift back towards silver, and I'm so happy about that because I find silver has always flattered me just a little bit better. So I actually recently picked up their Inna necklace in silver. I also have this one in gold and I wear it a lot. I just find this very simple, very shiny piece really just elevates any outfit. It can really dress up a very casual outfit, or it can just go with anything. It's so pretty, and I absolutely love it in both shades. I also have the sage earrings, which I love because they're a little more fun than a traditional hoop, but they're not so huge that they're kind of in the way, that they hurt to sleep on. And that's another big thing with me is when it comes to earrings, I have very sensitive ears. So having pieces that I can sort of leave in if I forget to take them out before bed or anything like that, they're not going to irritate my ears. And Ana Luisa pieces have never ever irritated my ears, which I really appreciate. So if you are interested in picking anything up at any time, I will leave my link down below at the top of the description box, as well as my code, which I believe is Christy age 35, and that will save you a little bit as well. If you're interested, I want to say another huge thank you to Ana Luisa for continuing to support my channel, and let's get into the best palettes for spring. So normally this video goes up quite a bit earlier, but there have been a ton of makeup launches lately that have kept me busy. So I figured that now that we're officially into spring, we should talk about the best palettes. So the first palette is one that I wore very recently. This is the Viseart Paris Love Letter palette. So I was actually wearing this in my Sephora recommendations video, if you happen to catch that. And I love this palette. So this one is probably the most springy palette I have from Viseart. I love that it has all of these very light shades. You get a purple, you get a green, you get a lot of these peachy tones as well. And it's definitely not a palette you're going to love if you like to get a lot of depth. I mean, this brown up here is really the only deep shade you're going to get in this palette. But if you like these lighter, more ethereal type looks, I think you'll really enjoy this palette. This palette is phenomenal for doing like 2-shade eyeshadow looks, which I know are very popular right now, with me included. So I think if you're someone who loves that, but you also want those more brighter, more playful, springy tones, I think this would be a wonderful palette to reach for. The next palette is the one I'm actually wearing today, and this is from Colourpop. This is the Pretty Please palette. So Colourpop is one of the only affordable eyeshadow formulas that I enjoy. Again, I've said it before, I'm a bit of an eyeshadow snob. I do tend to believe you get what you pay for when it comes to eyeshadows. I just think that is the one place that the drugstore hasn't managed to master quite yet. But Colourpop and Alter Ego are my two absolute favorite affordable formulas. And the Pretty Please palette from Colourpop is no exception. I love this. Obviously, this is another one that is very light. But what I love about this palette is that this row here actually is 3 Supershock shadows. And then you get this mix of pinks and purples. You get some browns in here. Again, much like the Viseart palette, you're not going to get a lot of depth with this one, but you're going to get some very beautiful pastel leaning pinky purple looks, and I just think they're so beautiful every single time. Again, today I just have this pinky shade here all through the crease, and then this Supershock all over the lid, and a little bit of this one on the inner corner, and that's it. I just kept it very simple today, and I really enjoy how this looks. I think if you're trying to get into really complicated looks, you might not love this palette, or if you like a lot of depth, you won't like this one, but I overall just think this one is so beautiful. The next palette I want to mention is also from Colourpop. I don't know if they still have this one, but if you have it in your collection, now is the time to dig it out. This is the So Very Lovely palette. So this is one that I haven't used maybe as much as some of the others, but it is so beautiful and I always want to use it. But this is one that for some reason I only like to use in the springtime. It's just such a springy color story that it feels wrong to use any other time. That is just me, but I love the range of purples and golds you get in here. You can kind of lean into the burgundy a little bit. That is the deepest shade, unfortunately. And then you get some really pretty browns to play with as well. But this is just another one that is just warm and beautiful and pink and purple and gold and just everything that makes me think of spring, sunshine, flowers, all of the things. I think this is so, so beautiful. So if you have this one, I definitely think now is the time to dig it out. I think it was a really underrated palette. I don't think this is one that got enough appreciation when it first came out or at all, but I still think it is super beautiful. Okay, the next palette I want to mention is actually from Alter Ego. So I do have two Alter Ego palettes in this video, and I also have their high-end counterparts. So the first one I want to mention is the Sakura palette. So first of all, this packaging. I mean, how beautiful is that packaging? So then opening this up, it's so stunning. So this is, of course, an alternative for the Natasha Denona Retro Glam. And that is a palette that came out around holiday. But part of me always felt like this is more of a spring color story if you love to lean more into those greens. So we do have these green tones. We have a row of really beautiful pinks. And then we have some of these more green toned browns, if that makes sense. And what I love about Alter Ego when they do create alternatives for those high-end options is that they change the layout around to make the color story make more sense, if you know what I mean. I find that the original palettes, though beautiful and incredible formulas, can be laid out a little bit chaotic. Whereas with this, I find it just makes it make more sense. So I really do appreciate that. I also think if you're going to lean into these more soft greens, springtime is the time to do it. I love these tones down here as well. I really do. This pink row, also super stunning. I just think these are so beautiful. So I do highly recommend this color story for the spring. The next Alter Ego palette I pulled is actually their Coastal palette. So again, with the beautiful, stunning packaging, so beautiful, and this is what the inside looks like. So this one is, of course, an alternative for the Huda Beauty Rose Quartz. This one is gorgeous. This is one where I don't think they necessarily changed the layout to make it make more sense, but I mean, it is pretty much a pink and purple and brown leaning color story, so it is a little bit more intuitive to begin with. I love these. I love the way that they tried to emulate the textures in the Huda Beauty palette as well, and the shades are still absolutely stunning, easy to work with, so pretty. I love them, and I just feel like this pinky purple moment is so much fun and easy to work with in the springtime. You know, in the spring, that is when I go all in on pinky eyeshadows. I would say from February till maybe May, I'm all about the pinky toned eyeshadows. So I do think this palette is a wonderful option. The next palette I've pulled is from Anastasia, and this is the Cosmos palette. So this one I believe came out last year, and this one is also very pretty. You do get a row on the bottom here of these more typical mattes that you get in a lot of her palettes, but then you get these really dark deep shades toward the end here, but then along the top and the shade you get these gorgeous ethereal, sparkly, beautiful shimmers. And they're so pretty. This blue actually looks a little bit more green on the lid. In my opinion, this shade Supernova is absolutely stunning. Again, if you're really into those two shadow eyeshadow looks, I think this palette is perfect. This is one that you don't want to overly complicate it by using too many shades at once because it usually doesn't turn out. But if you do keep it simple, I think you would really, really love this palette. It is truly very pretty. I've gone back and forth on it a few times in all honesty, because on one hand I just see these mattes that are in every single palette, and then you get these more ethereal shades, and then I don't use it much because it is a little bit more colorful, but at the end of the day, this really is a beautiful palette, and when is a better time to break it out than the springtime? Okay, next, and probably the most obvious, is the Natasha Denona Pastel palette. So she does have a mini, and I'm not mentioning that one in this video because I don't really like it as much, but this is the most perfect spring color story. I love this palette. This is one that, of course, I don't reach for as much as some of the others because I don't wear a ton of pastels, and I find them a little harder to work with, but of course, in Natasha's formula, they aren't so difficult to work with. She does have my favorite eyeshadow formula. I'm not going to deny that. I do love this palette. I think it's so beautiful. If I ever want to go for pastels, I always reach for this. I almost reached for it today before I went for the Pretty Please palette, but I do love this one. I love that you have these mint green tones. If you want to go that way, you can go with these pinks. You can go a little bit blue. This purple is really fun to work with. This is the most spring color story. This is very much an Easter color story, if you will. At the time I'm filming this, that is next weekend, so this is the perfect time to break it out. I think this palette is truly very, very beautiful, and I think it is definitely maybe the most obvious one I pulled out today. The next palette is actually one of the Alter Ego high-end counterparts, and this is the Natasha Denona Retro Glam palette. This one, again, the color story, absolutely stunning. You can see what I mean when I said the Alter Ego palette really just kind of changed the story around to make it make more sense. This is definitely a little bit more chaotic, but it's still such a beautiful color story. And the reason I feel comfortable putting this one in as well as the alternative is just because maybe you already have this one and you don't have the Alter Ego, then just take this one out. It is so, so, so good. And also, you cannot compete with Natasha's formula. Pat McGrath has a wonderful formula. Huda Beauty has a wonderful formula. A lot of brands do, but none of them are Natasha Denona. It's just my absolute favorite brand for eyeshadows. So I love this palette. If you have it, dig it out, play with it. Again, these more pastel leaning greens, now is the time to play with those. With that little bit of frost you get there. Then you have some of those pinks if you want to go that way. The shade Flutter can brighten anything up. It's so, so stunning. And the next one is the Huda Beauty Rose Quartz. This is also like its Alter Ego counterpart. I do think they played with the tones a little bit, so I think that the Alter Ego is a little bit more subdued than this one. This one has a little bit more brightness to it than the Alter Ego. I think this palette is absolutely stunning as well, so if you do have it, now is the time. Again, like I said, with the Alter Ego, you cannot beat these pinky purple tones. They're so stunning. And of course, I love this shade right here. This is such a beautiful brown. I love a good brown, but this palette is also such a staple for the springtime. This palette has seen a lot of love and a lot of use from me. And the final palette I want to mention is also from Huda Beauty, and this is one that they no longer have, but that is still probably one of the best she's ever done. This is the Mercury Retrograde palette. So, so, so beautiful. Again, getting into those textures. And we've got some pinks, we've got some purples, we've got some mint greens and some browns. And it's the perfect mix of color as well as neutral tones, the perfect amount of brightness, the perfect amount of sparkle, the perfect amount of everything in my opinion. I just love this palette. I think it's so pretty. I don't use it nearly as often as I would like to, simply because I know you can't get it anymore. So I don't love to use it on camera, but I do truly love this palette. This is by far one of the prettiest she's ever done. And when I think spring, the Natasha Denona Pastel and the Mercury Retrograde are some of the very first color stories that come to mind. So if you do have any of these palettes, now is the time to dig them out. Let me know down below some of your favorite spring eyeshadow palettes. I love hearing from you guys so, so much. Thank you again to Anna Luisa for continuing to support my channel. Don't forget to click my link down below if you're interested in purchasing anything. But that is it for me today. Thank you again so very much for watching. If you're new here, I hope you'll consider subscribing before you go. I do upload new videos every single week. Thank you again so very much for watching, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!